The sound of the door clicking shut behind you. The Count wasn't sure he had ever heard it before, exactly. In tone it was delicate and unobtrusive, and yet it had a definitive suggestion of dismissal, which was apt to put one in a philosophical frame of mind. Even if a person generally frowned upon rude and abrupt behaviour, under the circumstances he might have to admit a certain rough justice upon finding himself in an empty hallway with his shoes in his hand and his shirt untucked, as the woman he's just left falls soundly asleep. For if a man has had the good fortune to be plucked from the crowd by an impetuous beauty, shouldn't he expect to be sent on his way without ceremony? Well, maybe so. But standing in the empty corridor across from a half-eaten bowl of borscht, the Count felt less like a philosopher than a ghost. Yes, a ghost, thought the Count, as he moved silently down the hall. Like Hamlet's father roaming the ramparts of Elsinore after the midnight watch. Or like Akaky Akakievich, that forsaken spirit of Gogol's, who in the wee hours haunted the Kalinkin Bridge in search of his stolen coat. Why is it that so many ghosts prefer to travel the halls of night? Ask the living, and they will tell you that these spirits either have some unquenched desire or an unaddressed grievance that stirs them from their sleep and sends them out into the world in search of solace. But the living are so self-centred. Of course they would judge a spirit's nocturnal wanderings as the product of earthly memories, when in fact, if these restless souls wanted to harrow the bustling avenues of noon, there is nothing to stop them from doing so. No, if they wander the halls of night, it is not from a grievance with or envy of the living. Rather, it is because they have no desire to see the living at all, any more than snakes hope to see gardeners, or foxes the hounds. They wander about at midnight because at that hour they can generally do so without being harried by the sound and fury of earthly emotions. After all those years of striving and struggling, of hoping and praying, of shouldering expectations, stomaching opinions, navigating decorum, and making conversation, what they seek, quite simply, is a little peace and quiet. At least, that is what the Count told himself as he drifted down the hall. While, as a rule, the Count always took the stairs, when he approached the second-floor landing that night, on some ghostly whim he called for the elevator, assuming he would have it to himself. But when the door slid open, there was the one-eyed cat. "Kutuzov!" he exclaimed in surprise. Taking in every detail of the Count's appearance, the cat responded exactly as the Grand Duke had responded under similar circumstances many years before, that is, with a stern look and a disappointed silence. "Ahem," said the Count, as he stepped onto the elevator while trying to tuck in his shirt without dropping his shoes. Parting with the cat on the 5th floor, the Count trudged up the steps of the belfry in woeful acknowledgement that the celebration of his anniversary had been a fiasco. Having set out to gamely etch his mark on the wall had etched its mark on him. And as experience had taught the Count many years before, when this happens, it is best to wash one's face, brush one's teeth, and pull one's covers over one's head. But as the Count was about to open the door to his rooms, on the back of his neck he felt a breath of air that was distinctly reminiscent of a summer breeze. Turning to his left, the Count stood motionless. There it was again, coming from the other end of the floor. Intrigued, the Count walked down the hall, only to find that all the doors were tightly shut. At the hallway's end, there seemed to be nothing but a confusion of pipes and flues. But in the farthest corner, in the shadow of the largest pipe, he discovered a wall-mounted ladder that led to a hatch in the roof, which someone had left open. Putting on his shoes, the Count quietly climbed up the ladder and out into the night. The summer breeze that had beckoned the Count now wrapped him in its full embrace. warm and forgiving, it called up feelings of summer nights from earlier in his life, from when he was 5 and 10 and 20 on the streets of St. Petersburg or the pastures of Idle-Hour. Nearly overcome by the surge of old sentiments, he needed to pause a moment before continuing to the western edge of the roof. Before him lay the ancient city of Moscow, which, after waiting patiently for 200 years, was once again the seat of Russian governance. Despite the hour, the Kremlin shimmered with electric light from every window, as if its newest denizens were still too drunk with power to sleep. But if the lights of the Kremlin shimmered brightly, like all earthly lights before them, they were diminished in their beauty by the majesty of the constellations overhead. Craning his neck, the Count tried to identify the few that he had learned in his youth. Perseus, Orion, the Great Bear, each flawless and eternal. To what end, he wondered, had the divine created the stars in heaven to fill a man with feelings of inspiration one day and insignificance the next? Lowering his gaze to the horizon, the Count looked out beyond the limits of the city, to where that ancient comfort of sailors, the morning star, burned brightest in all the firmament, and then blinked. "Good morning, Your Excellency." The Count spun about. Standing a few feet behind him was a man in his early 60s wearing a canvas cap. When the man took a step forward, the Count recognized him as one of the handymen who battled the hotel's leaky pipes and creaky doors. "That's the Shukov, all right," he said. "The Shukov?" "The radio tower." He pointed in the distance toward the comfort of sailors. Ah, thought the Count with a smile. Mishka's spiralling structure of steel broadcasting the latest news and intelligence. The two men were silent for a moment, as if waiting for the beacon to blink again, which it reliably did. "Well, the coffee'll be ready. You might as well come along." The old handyman led the Count to the northeast corner of the roof, where he had established something of a camp between two chimneys. In addition to a 3-legged stool, there was a small fire burning in a brazier, on which a coffee pot was steaming. The old man had chosen the spot well, for while it was out of the wind, he still had a view of the Bolshoi that was only slightly impaired by some old crates stacked at the edge of the roof. "I don't get many visitors," the handyman said, "so I don't have a second stool." "That's quite all right," said the Count, picking up a 2-foot plank, setting it on end, and balancing himself on its edge. "Can I pour you a cup?" "Thank you."